MLBB Around the World is powered by Asus Republic of Gamers. The ROG phone is the official gaming phone of the M6 World Championships. As you're watching this, M6 may as well be in full swing, or it's possible that M6 has already ended and you're just looking at how wrong my opinions are about each of the teams that competed. Whichever way it is, wherever you are, when or where you're from, welcome to MLBB Around the World. At your service, my name is Leo, and we're talking about the dark horses in this episode. Let's get it started. First off, let's talk about the NACT 2024 Fall Champions going for the full reverse sweep. Tucked underneath his blankies, laid down full-on horizontal. Hoon helped lead BTK to a championship finish, making a beeline for M6. Interesting how I used Hoon as the main driver, because everyone knows how important Zane is for BTK, right? Everyone knows that he is am I gonna get flack for this? The heart and soul of NACT, of the region, right? But let's not get carried away. It is still a full team that we're talking about. BTK, last seen technically in M3. Like the last time we saw BTK on the world stage was at M3. Imagine that. And they finished third place. No one had expectations. No one knew exactly what was up, and things have never been the same since. So that's why, 3 years in, BTK is still a true dark horse. Thought about their metagame, whether then or now, BTK is very Zane-centric. Hoon and Shark are great at early game snap plays, so they're some of the most high IQ players that the game has seen coming from that region, and I think they can definitely stand toe-to-toe with the best of the best, even from C. They also have a few late-game surprises, as seen in a lot of M3 plays, M4 as well. I think M4 was prime Hoon. So with that said, I think hopefully they're prepared more now and they understand really what's at stake, given that they are once again carrying the banner of NA. Outside of the game though, they're what we call a heel team. They're anti-heroes, borderline villains, but that's how it is. That's how I see them. Even within their own region, right? Not everyone unanimously loves BTK. A lot of people will still cheer for their team, right? But at the end of the day, NA has one representative, and that's BTK. So luckily, they're great under pressure. So even if there are people who are opposed to their success or, will stand in their way just because that is the nature of competition, I'm sure they'll do great. On a micro to macro scale, I think there's still more micro at the end of the day. Like, their individual play still matters more than what they will eventually do on the map. More times than not, Zane will try to win off of a wipeout, or the majority of them will try to win their lanes to lead up to a better mid-game to the late-game push. And what they do for the most part almost always has to have immediate returns. Like, A plus B is equal to C. There's very few plans that show up in the TUVXYZ parts of the game, if you understand what I'm saying. If ever there were, I would assume they came from the gold lane. They would come from Zia, because based on what I've heard and what I've seen, it's Zia who has a higher cap when it comes to developing and when it comes to carrying the team to victory. So that means there's a lot of pressure on the gold lane. And also that means there's a lot of promise from the Filipino-Canadian. Pacing-wise, they like to fight on their own terms. They would always go for objectives, even if they are slightly down. Again, micro-wise, they're very confident. So if they can find a better position, if they can find a better angle, even if they are down a level or two, 1,000 or two, they will try to go for that more often than not. And when they draft, they would rather be proactive and focus on the early to mid. On the aggression scale, from Filipino to Indo, if you understand what I'm saying, they're closer to Indo. Maybe at the same scale level as Malaysia, so like 7.58 on the aggression scale. Expect the focus of their draft to fall on Mobazane, Hoon, and Fight Chicken. Shark has a very deep hero pool, so shouldn't worry much for him. In the jungle, Mobazane is known to pick the Julian, can even rock the Akai, has a special part of his heart in Roger, likes the Paquito. In the rise of YSS and Granger, those are some of his old flames. Shark is a pocket Guinevere. Zia has been seen to rock the Yusun Shin in gold. And Fight Chicken can very much play the Cho and XP. On the other hand, as their opponents, expect that they'll be attacking Zayn. So whatever the meta comes to be at M6, expect that the first few bans or even in the second phase, if they can, teams will attack Zayn. Thinking of what an interesting matchup would be come M6 would be, of course, Zayn versus any of the Malaysian teams, whether it be Vamos or SRG, the big one. It's been recorded that Zayn calls Malaysia the easy server. And how perfect that this is the return of Golden Age BTK. They have a huge chip on their shoulder, and what better way to prove that they belong on the big stage than by going up to the big dog and picking a fight. That's how it works in the yard. They're gonna walk up to the big dog and pick a fight and prove that they belong here. They talk a big game and they play one too. Now I know that in recent times that means more, and it has riled up a few Jimmies, if you know what I'm saying, but in-game, I think that'll still tell a really good story in-game. And I hope that what happened outside, because I really think that's some really good long-term storytelling happening. You know, Zayn calling it the easy server, now they have to play there, it being the host country, them being this ragtag group of players from the West, and how perfect that is because it's Malaysia now who is like the champion, like they're on top, writes itself. Moving on to the champions of the EECA, we're talking about MCC Season 4 champions. And again and again and again, they're champions. It's Team Spirit. Technically on paper, they are a 4-time MCC champion. Just had a few player changes, name changes here and there, but still at heart, this is the Deus Vult roster. This is the same Sawo and Sunset Lover led roster. We last saw them in MSC 2024 wherein they placed top 12, just barely could not make it out of groups. And prior to that, they were top 4 in M5. So definitely they have a lot to prove, and I'm looking forward to Team Spirit's performance. Talking about their metagame and how they play, they are Davai gaming at its finest. Davai meaning push forward or go, and that's how they play. Very aggressive when they can. Very controlled though still, because you see some macro efforts. And one thing I can say for sure is they're so fun to watch. Whether that be in-game or out, like their runs in MCC specifically and throwing back to M5, it's always unforgettable. Always memorable when you're talking about Team Spirit. They were in the lower bracket, by the way, in the MCC playoffs. They had to climb their way all the way up to the nail to eventually face off against Incilio again, beat them, drop them, so that they could be the main card representatives, and it would be Incilio fighting out of the wild card. And that's just poetry right there. That is literature, because them and Incilio have been going back and forth for the better part of 6 to 9 months. There's a lot of history between these two teams. Micro and macro, I'd say at the heart of things, Team Spirit still micro-centric, but what they do bring to the table is something I'd like to call dirty macro. I mean that in the sweetest ways. It's kind of messy, but you can definitely see the approach. So partially, you can say it's abstract. There is a semblance of discipline. Like, you know that there's a skeleton of I do this, and then this comes out. I do this happens. And I like to think that the influence of Coach Vren helps in that case. I like to think Coach Vren is teaching them these more structured approaches and combine that with Davai gaming, and you end up with what we see here now, what I call dirty macro. It's constant aggression, constant attacks throughout the map that eventually lead to these objective-centric pushes that leave the opponent folded. Which means pacing-wise, they like to start fast and hard, and then when necessary, they have a more controlled mid-game. Which now, in hindsight, reminds me, compared to every other non-C region, Team Spirit kind of looks like the most PH or C region playing team. Consider that, because I remember watching the MPL Indo playoffs, and then that concluding, them awarding Team Liquid ID, then I switch over to the MCC, immediately watch that, and I'm like, oh, this feels a lot more like the PH style. This is more reminiscent of what we do back home. Talking about picks here, specifically, there is a pocket savior in Sunset Lover. One shot would like the Prio Suyo for sure. He can also play Bene in the jungle. Sao, being the consummate veteran of the squad and de facto leader, has a Selena, great with that, has a Matilda, has a Jawhead, and can actually rock the Belleric Roam. Last but not least, Kid Bomba could almost play everything in the EXP. Solid on the Terizla still, even if he's slightly out of meta. Good with the Khalid. And he's also been rocking the up-and-coming Akai, which is slowly on the rise in the XP lane. Players to watch specifically, I'd say Sunset Lover, who's always the playmaker, and the Kid Bomba, who, come the late game, is such a total wild card. Like, if you're looking for Davai Gaming, he is the embodiment of Davai Gaming when you least expect it. What's an interesting matchup for Team Spirit in M6? I'd say BTK. Team Spirit has risen up to be the new and more consistent dark horse from out of the West, if you call it that, in the MLBB Esports landscape, outside of C at least. And if you're talking about anti-heroes or villains, they kind of have that aura. You kind of get that. Maybe not from one shot, maybe not from Hiko, especially Hiko, he's such a sweetheart. But considering their in-your-face playstyle, their Davai Gaming approach, you could see that. But the truth is, in reality, they're all just really cool guys. I'll tell you now, I've spent some time with Sunset Lover and Sao, two of the oldest players on this squad. Kid Bomba, forget about it. These guys are party animals. They're so fun and they're so friendly, but that shouldn't take away from their aura. That shouldn't take away from the position that they take now in the MLBB landscape. So these two anti-heroes facing off, to me, is a dream come true. BTK versus Team Spirit. Looking forward to it. From the EECA, let's go on over to Turkey and talk about the MTC Season 4 champion. They turned the world upside down and dethroned who I thought would have been champion forever, S2G Esports. They beat Fireflux. Finally, somebody took down Fireflux. I'm not saying that because I'm happy. I'm just saying I thought it was impossible prior. Last time we saw S2G, they were in the wild card in MSC 2024 and didn't get out of there. So back then, it was a long shot. Huge gap between S2G and Fireflux. Now, it was a turn. It's S2G sitting in the main card while Ulfednar, formerly Fireflux, is fighting out of the wild card to hopefully join the Swiss. What I've seen from the MTC Season 4 champions is, I don't know, they constantly go for these ambushes. They constantly try to set up from random bushes, and obviously to get into these bushes, you have to have big movement, you have to rotate well, you have to draft a lot of CC in your lineups and some modicum of burst. Once your opponent knows what you're up to, in this case, Fireflux, Ulfednar, they suddenly started getting away with a lot of free objectives because their opponents were scared. Their opponents wouldn't check into the bushes or wouldn't rotate, you know, as they normally would. So they would sneak in a lot of free turtles, a lot of free lords, even free turrets. So in essence, it's a very macro-centric approach to divide and conquer. Like, fights rarely have to happen because with S2G, based on the ambush playstyle, when you get into a fight with them, usually it's over in the blink of an eye. Usually, fights would end 3 for 1, 4 for 1, done, we'll move on. So this is a scary playstyle to come out of Turkey because I'll tell you now, since M3, since Turkey debuted on the world stage under Bedell, they've always been a real threat. So S2G dethroning Fireflux, dethroning Ulfednar should be a team to look out for. Are they micro or macro, you asked? Mid, XP, Roam, and Jungle, I can tell you for sure, are macro-centric. So they all play to this ambush playstyle. They all play to this end goal of we'll hide in bushes, we'll try to feign these big rotations so that eventually we can get free objectives. But their gold laner, I'll tell you now, is a micro god. Sigiboom. Sigiboom on a Beatrix is a thing of beauty. This might be a long shot, but I'll say it now, he reminds me of a Turkish Kelra or Oheb. Consider that. Imagine that. Sigiboom, especially since he's a Beatrix specialist, really reminds me of the gold standard and the Filipino sniper. Pacing-wise, I'd say S2G is comfortable with a comeback victory. S2G are okay with playing the long game because 5 out of 6 games in that Grand Finals went beyond 18 minutes. So they had to work for a lot of the objectives they eventually got. Worked hard for the good positioning and good trades that they got against Fireflux. For S2G to eventually usurp Fireflux from their throne, they had to work hard for it. So expect that even in the advent of the 14-15 minute game duration that we've seen rampant in MLBB Esports right now, S2G might be the outlier. That means they're patient, and that means they can read the map and play it until they're ready. Talking about power picks, their roamer Pagu, great on the Hylos, lethal with the Matilda, solid with the Cho. Their mid laner Begin has a pocket Lilia, and again, previously mentioned Sigiboom. He has a great Nathan, solid Moskov, and I think he's a Beatrix specialist. Like, let's just say that, all right? Even before the tournament starts, I'm gonna give him a nickname. That's how impressive he is to me. I call him the Turkish Trigger Man, the marksman specialist. Do with it what you will. Turkish Trigger Man. Murano, do your magic. Call him the Turkish Trigger Man. All right? Key players, I think, would be Sigiboom and Kazue. Again, that gold laner and the jungler. So the jungler's leading the macro, while Sigiboom just gets the payoff. Interesting matchup. You know what? I'm gonna have him shoot for the stars here. I'd like to see what S2G does if ever they somehow end up in the Swiss rounds against Fnatic Onyx Philippines. Let's say that, all right? Again, I see the Filipino Savage in Sigiboom. So that would be a treat for me. The Filipino Savage versus the Turkish Trigger Man. Make it happen. Make it happen. Let's see, because again, Turkey has always been a threat. Last time in MSC, Fireflux then took SRG all the way to 5 games. What's a best of one? What's a best of one to give an old boy a treat? That's what I'm looking forward to. Last but not least, among the dark horses, at least for me, in M6, would be the MPL MENA Season 6 champions. That's right. This might be a hot take, but I think MENA's champions representing Saudi Arabia should be a threat. I'm talking about Twisted Minds. They were last seen in MSC 2024 with a less than stellar performance, but their growth from then on, especially in the advent of Hoda, should be something we consider. Talking about their gameplay, they are CC heavy, so expect Sanji and Troll to play high CC priority heroes. Objectives define their movement, so where there's the big takes is where they eventually rotate to. In case you need more convincing, if you watched IESF, you'll know that Saudi Arabia swept Indonesia. And Indonesia went deep, fam. So if they were able to play like that against Team Indonesia, what more when the stakes are so much higher? What more in a Swiss best of one, where they could somehow cheese you and through the sheer mechanics of Hoda, find you lacking. Which now comes the question, are they micro or macro? No doubt, their jungler, the Messiah, the savior, Hoda, is a very micro-gifted player. I think the influences of Coach Lyric are very evident. They know how to play the map. So I'll say a majority of the team is macro-centric, and because of Hoda's micro-giftedness, it allows for the team to be relieved of all the pressure. So they can actually rotate and do what they gotta do on the map to be able to achieve their game plan. Looking back at their gameplay, you can see that the remnants of the Twisted Express are very much still in their DNA. That playstyle is still intact. But consider that they'll be facing off against much more powerful opponents, a more varied metagame, a constantly evolving metagame at M6. I expect for them to take a more surgical approach. They gotta slow down, consider all of the options, consider how they're gonna attack certain opponents, attack certain strategies, and still rely on Hoda. Has to be centered on him, and they have to rely on him to be able to lead them towards a sound plan of attack. They'll rarely trade for Hoda. They'll rarely put him in danger. And that's possibly a strength or a weakness that they'll have to take into consideration. Specific picks for Twisted Minds. Again, very Hoda-centric. Expect them to prioritize the Fanny, the Suyo, the Hayabusa. Sanji has a pocket Masha, has an X-Borg, and an Edith, even when she's, kind of fallen off. Roam-wise, expect Troll to prioritize the Minotaur, like they still kind of like that hero. And he has a pocket Hellcurt too. And if you're talking about their focus, like pivotal players that will be centering their play around, the aforementioned Hoda, their jungler, and their gold laner, Sano. An interesting grudge match for me in M6 would be against Team Spirit. In MSC 2024, both teams were unable to move out of groups. And in that group, Team Spirit scored their only series victory against Twisted Minds. So there's that sting there. There's that little bit of salt that, hey, remember last time you beat us and we were both down and out, but you still, there's that. Gameplay wise, it's Davai Gaming versus a budding macro centric jungle powered roster. Both have Filipino coaches that, want to mold these micro gifted teams into a more structured unit. Hopefully this is a good match. Hopefully they do meet in the Swiss. I don't know, just another chapter in a budding rivalry. You tell me, who would you like to see Twisted Minds face off against? And that's that for this episode of MLBB Around the World. We took a look at 4 teams, studied a little bit of the dark horses at the tournament. In the final episode of MLBB Around the World, covering the M6 World Championships, we're talking about the legends, the titans, the giants, leaders of the pack. Talking about the teams representing MPL Indonesia, MPL Malaysia, and MPL Philippines. Let me know if I missed anything about these teams that we covered in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this bit of content. And shout out to my man Ray Ash and everyone who is a part of the MLBB Esports community. Y'all are great. Y'all are the real MVPs for helping us understand these teams more, because they're your teams, you love them, and you know them better than a lot of us do. So please let us know, and let's get into a nice, healthy discussion. Y'all have a great day.